I had always considered myself a good person. I wasn't perfect, but I tried to be kind, honest, and fair. But there was something about the last year that had left me feeling empty, disconnected from everything that once felt real. My name is Olivia, I'm 27, and I had been married to Greg for almost 3 years. When we first met, he was everything I wanted. Charming, funny, and ambitious. Our relationship moved fast, but it felt right. We were two peas in a pod, always laughing, always together. But somewhere along the way, the laughter faded. The moments of closeness grew fewer. What had once been spontaneous and full of joy had turned into a predictable routine. It wasn't that Greg was a bad person. He wasn't. He had a good job, a stable life, and he loved me in his own way. But there was something missing in our marriage. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. We'd stopped talking about our hopes and dreams, and I found myself more and more withdrawn, seeking excitement in small, fleeting things outside of our relationship. The turning point came one evening when Greg came home late from work. He was tired, stressed, and barely looked at me as he sat down to eat. I couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment, not because he was tired, but because I was tired too. Tired of feeling invisible. Tired of being alone, even when he was right beside me. I had tried to bring it up a few times, but the conversation always ended the same way. I'm just busy, Liv. It's just a phase. We'll get through it. And so we did. We got through it day after day, our marriage slipping through my fingers like sand. That night, I sat on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. It was almost as if my body had gone on autopilot, while my mind drifted into a fog. That was when Emma texted me. She was one of my closest friends, and we hadn't had a proper girls' night out in months. We'd always joked about how we should go out, have some fun, and let loose like we used to before I got married. But it had never actually happened. Maybe because I was too busy. Maybe because Greg had become a priority, even though he wasn't aware of it. Emma's message popped up, "I'm in the mood for a wild night. You in?" I didn't hesitate for a second. Maybe it was the frustration that had built up inside me over the last few months, or maybe it was just the sheer desire to feel something, anything, that wasn't the emptiness I had grown used to. But something inside me clicked, and I found myself typing, "I'm in." The lie seemed harmless at first. A simple girls' night out was all I needed. Greg wouldn't care. He'd be working late anyway. And besides, I was still a young woman. I deserved to have fun. I deserved to feel wanted, desired. Greg had stopped showing me affection, and somewhere along the way, I'd stopped showing it to him as well. We'd both fallen into a rut, but I didn't want to admit that. Not yet. I made plans with Emma to meet at a bar downtown. It was a place we used to go to when we were younger, loud, chaotic, and full of life. I hadn't been there in ages, and the thought of it made my heart race. The idea of being out of the house, away from Greg, was liberating. The lie I told myself was that I was just going to have fun, a quick night out to let off steam. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was looking for something I didn't know I needed, something to fill the void inside me. I told Greg I was heading out with Emma. "Have fun," he said, barely looking up from his phone. And just like that, I was free. I was going to get a taste of something different. I wasn't planning to hurt anyone, but that's how these things start, don't they? With small decisions that don't seem harmful at the time. With choices that feel like they're just for you, but end up affecting everything. I arrived at the bar just as the sun began to set. The night air was warm and carried a sense of excitement that felt almost intoxicating. Emma was already there, sitting at a booth by the window, her smile wide as she waved me over. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, and I could tell she had been looking forward to this night just as much as I had. It felt good to be out, to be away from the weight of my responsibilities. It felt good to be me again. We caught up over a couple of drinks, laughing about old stories and reminiscing about the carefree days before my marriage. Emma knew about the tension between Greg and me. She'd listened to my complaints, my frustrations, the way I felt like I was drifting away from him. I didn't go into detail, but she understood. She always understood. As the night went on, the bar grew louder, the crowd more boisterous. And that's when I saw him. He walked in like he owned the place, tall, confident, and with a presence that made heads turn. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his tailored suit screamed wealth. But it wasn't just the clothes that caught my attention. It was the way he moved, the way he scanned the room with quiet authority, like he was used to people noticing him. I felt a flicker of something, curiosity, maybe, or maybe it was just the alcohol starting to take effect. He walked up to the bar, and I couldn't help but watch. He ordered a drink in a smooth, deep voice, then glanced around the room before his eyes landed on me. I quickly looked away, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was staring right at me. My heart skipped a beat, and before I knew it, Emma had nudged me. "Do you know him?" she asked with a teasing grin. I shook my head, but the truth was I had no idea. I didn't know why I was so interested in him. Maybe it was his confidence, his air of mystery, or maybe it was the fact that he looked so different from the kind of men I usually met. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't nervous or awkward. He was just there, exuding a kind of calm that made everything else feel insignificant. "Go talk to him," Emma urged, nudging me again. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. My mind raced with thoughts of Greg, of what I was doing, of the lies I was telling. But then I remembered why I was here. I was here to escape, to feel something different. I could tell myself I was just having fun, just letting loose for one night. It was just a few drinks, a few laughs. It didn't mean anything. Right. Taking a deep breath, I stood up and walked over to the bar, trying to act casual. He was still standing there, his back to me as he took a sip from his glass. I could feel my heart racing, my nerves on edge, but I wasn't about to turn back now. "Nice suit," I said, my voice sounding a little too breathless. He turned to look at me, a small, amused smile playing on his lips. "Thank you," he replied, his voice smooth and warm. "It's rare that someone notices the details around here." I laughed nervously, suddenly aware of how out of place I felt. "Well, I'm not exactly the type to be here often," I admitted, feeling silly as the words left my mouth. "I can tell," he said with a knowing smile. "I'm Alexander," he added, extending a hand. I shook it, his grip firm and confident. "Olivia," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. The conversation started slowly, but it quickly gained momentum. We talked about everything: his job, his travels, his views on life. There was something about him that was so captivating. He wasn't like anyone I had met before. He didn't talk about mundane things like work or the latest trends. He spoke with a depth and certainty that made me feel like he understood the world in a way that most people didn't. As the night wore on, I found myself hanging on his every word. There was no pressure, no awkwardness. He wasn't trying to impress me or flirt with me in some obvious way. He just listened, really listened, and when he spoke, it felt like he was sharing something meaningful. Somewhere along the way, I started to relax. The tension I had been carrying all night seemed to melt away. We joked about everything and nothing. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in months. He wasn't asking for anything, just talking, enjoying the conversation. But I wasn't foolish. I knew what was happening. This wasn't just a casual conversation. I was drawn to him, and I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. "You're different," I said without thinking, my words coming out before I could stop them. He smiled, his eyes gleaming with something that I couldn't quite place. "So are you." And in that moment, I realized what I had been craving, what I had been missing. It wasn't just the excitement or the thrill. It was someone who made me feel alive, someone who made me feel special. I didn't know what it was that had brought us together that night, but I knew I didn't want it to end. As the night continued, I found myself more and more caught up in the energy between Alexander and me. The way he looked at me with such intensity, as if he could see straight into my soul, made me feel like I was the only person in the room. It was intoxicating. And with each passing minute, I found myself more drawn to him. We had moved from the bar to a quieter lounge area in the back. The lights were dimmer, the music softer, and the atmosphere felt more intimate. I had never felt so seen before. Every word he said seemed to resonate with me, making me feel understood in a way that Greg never had. It wasn't that Greg didn't try, but I had stopped feeling like his priority long ago. I wasn't even sure when it happened. The emotional distance between us had slowly crept in until it felt like we were two strangers living in the same house. With Alexander, it was different. There was an undeniable chemistry between us. The laughter flowed easily, and the conversation, though casual, felt deeper than anything I had shared with anyone in a long time. He wasn't asking about my marriage, about Greg, or about anything in my life that tied me back to my reality. He was just asking about me, and it felt good. It felt like I could be someone else for a while. At some point, the alcohol started to take its toll, blurring the lines of clarity in my mind. My thoughts became less guarded, my actions less restrained. I had told myself this was just a night out, just a bit of fun to escape the monotony of my marriage. But somewhere along the way, the fun had started to feel like something more, something dangerous. Alexander's touch was light at first, just a hand brushing against mine as he gestured towards something across the room. But then it lingered. His fingers traced lightly over the back of my hand, and I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through my body. I quickly looked down, unsure of what to do. Should I pull away? Should I pretend like nothing was happening? But something inside me told me to stay, to lean into it. When I met his gaze again, there was an intensity in his eyes that made my breath catch. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The silence between us was enough. It was as if the world had fallen away, and the only thing that mattered was the connection we were sharing. He leaned in closer, his voice a soft whisper as he said, "You're not just here for a drink, are you, Olivia?" I froze for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. His words hung in the air, and I could feel my pulse quickening. The temptation to say yes, to give in, was overwhelming. I wanted to feel something. I wanted to feel wanted, desired, something I hadn't felt in so long. I had told myself that I was just looking for an escape, just a moment of distraction from the pain of my marriage. But now, sitting across from him, I realized I was looking for more than that. I had no idea what was happening to me. I had always been the kind of person who believed in loyalty, in doing the right thing. I never thought I would be the one to cheat. But here I was, sitting with a man who made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just charming or attractive. He made me feel alive, like I mattered. Like I was something more than just a wife to a man who barely noticed me anymore. Without thinking, I leaned in, closing the space between us. His lips were soft when they met mine, and for a moment, I forgot everything. I forgot about Greg. I forgot about the lies. I forgot about the life I had left behind. It was just Alexander and me, and in that moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. The kiss deepened, and I found myself pulling him closer. My hands slid up his chest, and I could feel the heat of his body against mine. The excitement coursing through me was unlike anything I had felt in ages. It was thrilling. It was reckless. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt wanted. But as I pulled away, breathless, reality started to creep in. A small voice in the back of my mind whispered that this was wrong, that this wasn't who I was. But then Alexander's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt that voice fade away, swallowed up by the desire I felt building inside me. "I want you," he murmured, his voice low and steady. And for a moment, I let myself believe that this was all that mattered, that this fleeting escape from my reality was enough, that it could be enough. I wasn't thinking about Greg, about what this would mean. I wasn't thinking about the consequences. All I could think about was how Alexander made me feel. In that moment, I made a choice. A choice that felt both liberating and terrifying. A choice that would change everything. I stood up, my heart racing with anticipation and guilt. He stood with me, his hand on my lower back as we walked toward the door. I knew what was about to happen, and part of me was exhilarated by it. Another part, the part that had always been good and loyal, was screaming for me to stop, to turn back. But it was too late. I had crossed the line. The night was a blur, a whirlwind of passion and adrenaline. But when I woke up the next morning, reality hit me like a freight train. My head was pounding from the alcohol, and my body ached in places I hadn't expected. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. The room was unfamiliar, the light outside the window harsh and unforgiving as it filtered through the blinds. The sheets were tangled around me, and as I sat up, I realized with a sinking feeling that I had made a choice I couldn't take back. Alexander's side of the bed was empty. He wasn't there. The space felt cold and hollow without him, and I felt a pang of confusion and regret settle deep in my chest. What had I done? I hadn't planned for any of this to happen. I hadn't expected to wake up in a stranger's bed, my clothes strewn across the floor, the remnants of a night that was both thrilling and terrifying at once. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like an eternity, trying to piece together the events of the previous night. I remembered the kiss, the way his touch made me forget everything. I remembered how much I wanted to feel something, anything other than the emptiness that had crept into my marriage. But now, in the stark light of day, the guilt was overwhelming. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, snapping me out of my thoughts. I picked it up, still groggy, and saw a missed call from Emma, followed by a message. "Emma, you okay? Heard some stuff this morning. Call me." I frowned, confused. What had happened? What was Emma talking about? I typed out a quick response, trying to keep it casual. "Me, yeah, I'm fine. Just woke up. What's going on?" I hit send and then dropped the phone on the bed, rubbing my temples. The pounding in my head was relentless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, this time with a notification. It was a message from an unknown number. My stomach dropped as I clicked on it, and my eyes widened as I read the text. "Unknown, nice night out? Hope your husband doesn't find out about your little adventure. Don't worry, we have it all on camera." I felt the blood drain from my face. My throat went dry, and I was hit with a wave of panic. What the hell? How did they know? How did someone get footage of me? My fingers shook as I scrolled through the message, and sure enough, there was a video attached. It was a short clip, taken outside a building. In the footage, I could see Alexander and me walking to a car, his hand on my back, my hand resting on his arm. We were laughing, talking, and in that moment, everything seemed so innocent. But the context, everything I had done, flashed before my eyes. This wasn't a harmless night out. It was a betrayal. I clicked play. The video showed me and Alexander getting into the back seat of the car. The camera angle wasn't clear enough to show much detail, but it was enough. The implication was there. It was obvious what had happened. The video ended abruptly, and I stared at the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. I felt sick. I texted back, my fingers trembling. "Me, who is this? What do you want?" I hit send, but before I could even process the message, my phone rang. It was Emma again. I answered it, trying to keep my voice steady. "Olivia? What the hell is going on?" she asked, her voice frantic. "Did you see the video? Someone sent it to me this morning. You're on some kind of doorbell camera." I swallowed hard, the truth hitting me like a punch to the gut. "Yeah, I saw it. I don't know who has it, but I'm screwed. Listen, I know you didn't plan this. But what the hell were you thinking? You've got to tell Greg, Olivia. This is bigger than you think." Her words felt like a slap in the face, but she was right. I couldn't hide from this forever. I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. The reality of what I had done was suffocating. The guilt, the fear, it all crashed down on me in an instant. "I don't know what to do, Emma," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I never meant for any of this to happen. It was just one night, just one mistake. But now I'm going to lose everything." "You have to own up to it," Emma urged. "You need to come clean, or this will destroy you." I sat there, the weight of her words pressing down on me. She was right, but the thought of facing Greg, of telling him what I had done, made my stomach twist in knots. The fear of his reaction was paralyzing. But deep down, I knew I had no choice. The video, the proof, it was out there. Someone had it, and they weren't going to let me forget it. I could feel the walls closing in on me, and I realized that I had reached a point of no return. I took a shaky breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to face the consequences of my actions, but I didn't know how to begin. How could I tell Greg? How could I explain what I had done without losing him forever? I stared at the screen of my phone, the message still flashing from the unknown number. I wasn't just caught on camera. I was caught in a lie, and there was no way out. I spent the entire day in a haze, the weight of my actions hanging over me like a dark cloud. The video, the messages, the shame. I couldn't escape any of it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Alexander's face, his hands on me, and it all felt like a betrayal I couldn't undo. The reality of my mistake settled deep in my chest, and I knew that sooner or later, I would have to face Greg. But the thought of his disappointment, his anger, made me physically sick. By the time Greg came home that evening, I had barely moved from the couch. The silence in the house was suffocating, and I could hear the sound of his footsteps echoing through the hallway. He had no idea. He didn't know what had happened, what I had done. And yet, somehow, I felt like a stranger in my own home, as if the walls were closing in around me. He walked into the living room, looking tired but still carrying that familiar air of indifference that had become all too common between us. He didn't even look at me right away. It was as though he was already mentally somewhere else, distant, detached. I knew this was it, the moment I had been dreading. "Hey," I said softly, my voice shaky. "We need to talk." He froze mid-step, his eyes flickering toward me, a faint frown forming on his face. "What's wrong?" His tone was cold, almost robotic, as if he wasn't really asking but merely going through the motions. My throat tightened, and for a second, I couldn't find the words. Everything I had been holding inside seemed to explode all at once, and I was on the verge of tears. I made a huge mistake. Greg's expression didn't change, but I could tell he was growing more uneasy. He walked over to the couch and sat beside me, his gaze fixed on the floor. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice betraying the hint of concern. I wasn't honest with you," I began, my words spilling out in a rush. "I went out last night." I said it was a girls' night, but I paused, my breath catching in my throat. "I met someone. I made a terrible decision, and I kissed him. I couldn't bring myself to say it. The truth was too hard to face." Greg's eyes darkened, and I saw his jaw tighten. He didn't say anything at first, but I could feel the anger building in him. He was silent for a long time, and the quiet between us felt like 1,000 knives piercing the air. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke, his voice low and dangerously calm. "So you cheated on me." I flinched at the words, the accusation cutting deeper than anything I had ever heard. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Greg," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I was confused, and you went behind my back, Olivia. You lied to me." Again. His words hit me like a slap, and I recoiled, not because I was surprised, but because I knew deep down that he was right. I had lied. I had betrayed him. And now there was no going back. I reached for his hand, desperate to make him understand. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I was just escaping. I thought I needed something different, but now I see how wrong I was. I don't want anyone else. I don't want him. I want us. I want you." Greg pulled his hand away, his eyes cold. "You don't get to just fix this with words, Olivia. You don't get to just apologize and expect everything to be okay. You've destroyed something. Something I thought was real." I could see the hurt in his eyes, the cracks in the walls he had built around himself, and it shattered me. I had broken him, and I couldn't fix it. Not this time. "I'm not proud of what I did," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "But I swear to you, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Greg stood up abruptly, his face twisted in anger and disappointment. "You had your chance, Olivia. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." I stood up too, my heart pounding in my chest. "Please," I begged. "Please don't leave. Don't give up on us. I love you." For a moment, he didn't respond. He just stared at me, his face a mask of emotion I couldn't read. But then he looked away, as if the weight of my words had exhausted him. "I need some time to think," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. And with that, he walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, broken and lost. The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if my entire world had come crashing down around me, and I was left to pick up the pieces of something I had destroyed. I sat back down on the couch, feeling the weight of the consequences sink in. I had crossed a line, and now I was facing the aftermath. The pain in my chest was unbearable, and I realized then that the life I had known, everything I had taken for granted, might never be the same again. I had hurt him. I had betrayed him. And in the process, I had lost myself. Subscribe to our channel for powerful real stories that touch your heart. Join a community where emotions run deep and every story brings a new perspective. Don't miss out. Hit that bell for weekly updates.